Welcome back to Shop Talk for Season 5. I'm Brandi.
And this is James, and we talk about all things related to mental health and cross-cultural workers.
So glad you're here. All right, well, welcome to Shop Talk today. We have John Fawcett on our podcast. John, great to have you.
Thank you, Brandi.
Okay, I'm going to give you guys a little introduction to let you know a little bit about John. John has worked over 25 years in international humanitarian aid, focusing on the development and implementation of comprehensive staff support processes, cross-cultural team development, and leadership effectiveness. John has considerable experience in designing and implementing comprehensive staff support processes at local and global scales. He has worked across cultures and languages and has very wide global experience in applying these practices. In the early 1990s, he moved to humanitarian work in post-genocide Cambodia and began developing staff support processes for World Vision International in the context of the Cambodian and Rwandan tragedies. He was then asked to direct World Vision International's newly established staff support program. In this role, John developed a global network of trained staff workers who provided on-site support for the staff in World Vision International field locations. In 2003, John edited and published the Stress and Trauma Handbook, Strategies for Flourishing in Demanding Environments, which was published by World Vision Publications. This book has proved to be a foundational text for those in the business of supporting others who provide intentional care for others. A few years later, he took up the role of Director of Staff Support for Save the Children USA and led a process to develop an internal comprehensive staff support strategy. Since leaving Save the Children, John has consulted with many stakeholders in emergency and preparedness programs and with governmental donor agencies. He has published widely in the fields of research and strategic implementation. John now lives in his home country of New Zealand, and he enjoys time of semi-retirement with a focus on family, environmental conservation, and resilience.
Thank you, Brandi. Thank you.
We're going to talk with John about resilience today and what resilience looks like cross-cultural workers. Wondering if you have just your own sort of working definition of what resilience looks like for those in a cross-cultural context.
That's a great question, Brandi. I pondered on that for some time. I guess I've tried to distill my own definition down into something rather that might make sense for most people. I started off my career in psychology and learned all that terminology of psychology and the long words that go with psychology, all of the therapeutic words. But for most people, those words don't necessarily make a lot of sense in the real world. And so my working definition of resilience at the moment is the capacity or the ability to manage and cope and thrive with change. So it's about I think that stress comes from the constant change that we experience all the time in life. And no matter what we're doing, where we are, how we live, there is constant change. And that stress that comes from that is something rather that causes us distress. And so the capacity to manage and go with those changes is what I think is at the core of how someone is resilient. And so there's a lot more to it than that, but that's basically my working definition at the moment is managing and coping with change.
Yeah, I love that because it leaves room for the fact that resilience isn't just about bouncing back, which it often has been defined as, because we're often something different. So when we go through something that is stressful or challenging or a response to change, we might be all kinds of different on the other side of it, good, bad, and other ways.
No, you're right, James. And I think that the problem I've had with the bouncing back definition is the back part.
Right.
Because I think that what I found in my life, and I think what a lot of people will echo, is that it's very difficult to go back. That when something changes, whether it's a small thing or whether it's a big thing, there really isn't a way back to what life was before. And I think that part of what people feel, I guess, challenged by the definition of bouncing back is that they feel that there's an expectation from those telling them that it's time to bounce back is that they can get back to this previous state.
Right.
And we don't. Well, I think we bounce forward. And so the bouncing part is critical, but it's the forward momentum. We are going through change, and at the other side, we will be changed, and those around us will be changed, but it will be a good change. So it's like, I think, like a stone skipping across the lake. You know, if you stop bouncing, you start sinking. And the idea of the stone is to keep on bouncing as far as you can go. So I think I see it more as a forward momentum rather than a backward momentum.
Is that part of the stress that people encounter whenever they go through change? Is that sometimes that desire to for things to go back to how it was?
Oh,
And
absolutely.
yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think, I mean, I speak now from the perspective of someone who has a few years under his belt. So I'm biased. I'm biased because of my age. When I was younger and looking back even just a couple of years, I used to say, oh, it'd be really nice to be that age again. But with what I know now, there's always that sort of thing in the parenthesis at the end of that statement is I would like to go back to when I was 25 with what I know now.
Right.
Well, we know we laugh about that because we can't. So I think when I found that when counselors and therapists advise people to think about resilience as bouncing back, there's a tendency to feel that that's an impossible task.
Mm.
And therefore I'm likely to fail because I can't go back. But I can't tell the therapist or tell myself that because then I'm admitting defeat. So I prefer to work on the idea of bouncing forward and saying what you've got, what you carry with you in this moment is going to help you move forward to the next point. So you've got this wealth of experience. It's a challenge right now, but you can utilize the skills that got you to this point to move to the next point. So it's a movement forward rather than a movement backwards, or it's not a movement staying in the same place. Because I think that's the other part. People either want to go back or believe that they can go back, or they need to stay where they are now. And there's nothing that in anything we see in creation that stands still. Everything is always changing. So trying to stand still in the moment is an impossibility as well. So the only way is forward, really. It's the only way forward. And the question is, how do we move forward with grace, with love, with mercy, with happiness, with momentum, with mission, with caring, with meaning? Those are the things that make the difference about moving forward, I think.
The moving forward could be scary because it's a new and it's an unknown.
Yeah,
And so
absolutely.
maybe that's why people want to stay where they are, go back because that's even though it's hard, it's a known.
It is, and you're right. And I think that part of the thing happens as you get older. Well, as you grow through life, things become apparently more complicated. And so, particularly when you're adolescents, late adolescents, early 20s, you're trying to sort out a lot of things that are going on in life, many, many more than maybe you would have sorted out before. And so you need to feel like you're slowing down to be able to handle all of those things that are changing. And so you're saying, well, let's slow down, let's deal with all of these things before I can move on to the next step. Which is interesting, really, because when you think back to being a younger child, you look forward to Christmas, you look forward to the holidays, you look forward to a new experience. You would say to your parents, "Oh, I'm going to climb to the top of that tower because I want to get up there and see what it looks like from the top." So our childhood enthusiasm tends to drive us forward to new experiences. Now, after we've had a few falls off the tower, maybe got a few cuts and bruises, we say, "Oh, hang on, maybe not quite so fast. I'll do this a little bit differently." But that's where the training expertise comes in, really. That's where utilizing all of that enthusiasm to move forward and the skills that we learned because we did just bruise ourselves occasionally as we did those things, use what we've done in order to move forward into that exciting new future. You don't climb Everest without having fallen off a tree when you were a 10-year-old. But you don't fall off Everest if you've been very careful about how you have learned to climb up to those heights. And that's about managing the movement forward, I think.
How do you see the relationship between stress and resilience?
Stress is constant. Stress is part. The only things that don't have stress are the things that are dead.
Yeah.
I mean that's kind of like black humor in a sense, but everything is under constant pressure. I think that the idea of I would distinguish between stress and distress.
Mm.
So stress is what happens every day. Stress, we have to get up in the morning, we have to get our breakfast, we have to get ready for the day, we have to work our way through all of those things that happen in the day. All of those things bring pressure on our lives. Sometimes that pressure results in distress and pain and suffering. And those are the parts that really are the things that we try and avoid,
Mhm.
and we try and move with and deal with. So the resilience part is how do we cope with that distress? How do we manage that distress, work our way through the distress to places where we are more at peace and more together?
Which I'm going to assume is a developmental thing that we can grow in our ability, and it's dynamic, so it's not consistent over time. And What does it look like to grow in resilience?
So there's two parts to it, I think, James, and I think that you're right about the growing into it and the developmental process, but there's also the mentoring and teaching part of it. So as you know, if you're thinking about parents and children, for example, one of the key gifts that a parent can do for a child is to teach them how to manage distress and disappointment, acknowledging that disappointment and distress is part of growing up as a child, and that there will be challenges. Going to a new school is a challenge. Moving to a different class is a challenge. Becoming an adolescent and aware of attraction is a challenge. Being aware of temptations out there in the social network is a challenge. And so, as parents, we don't want to live the child's life for them, but we will acknowledge the fact that yes, there are challenges, there are stresses, and there will be disappointments. There'll be losses as you grow up, and you'll feel those keenly as an adolescent. How do you navigate that? Me as the parent, I've got some skills. Here are some suggestions about how you navigate that. And then the children take on their own skill sets. They develop that, and they develop that in a way that's being affirmed. You know, I need to face challenge in order that I can grow. There is that mentoring and teaching part as well, and I think that's where community comes into it. You know, community is about helping people grow through their challenges, and so the other part of it is adopting those changes for yourself, making choices. You know, I choose to deal with this disappointment or this challenge in this way, then reflecting on it and saying, well, was that actually a healthy way of dealing with it? You
Mm.
know, maybe it wasn't. Maybe I could have done something that was healthier than what I did before. Maybe going out and smashing bottles on the sidewalk is not a good idea. I could have come in and listened to some loud music instead through my headphones so I didn't distract other people. But there are ways of doing it. So we've got choices, and we will look, and hopefully our mentors, our teachers, our parents, our community will affirm the choices we've made and say, yeah, that was a good choice. What you did there, that was maybe not quite such a good choice, but you've learned from that, and move forward like that and develop your own. You're developing your own resilience package, really, your own resilience identity as you move through that.
Yeah, I always think of resilience as a team sport, not an individual one.
Absolutely.
John, I'm wondering, you've worked in some pretty intense areas, like we talked about in your bio. You've worked with Cambodia and Rwanda, just to name a few.
Yeah.
You've also worked with cross-cultural workers, and I'm wondering, in your work, if you notice certain types of people or personality types or whatever that tend to be a bit more resilient or are able to bounce forward
Yeah.
better.
I think it's hard to think of personality types as being the defining factor. I think there's something or other about the desire to look at difference that helps people be resistant. So resilient. So not the desire to go and be someone else, but that kind of openness to a difference in whatever it is that they're facing and saying, okay, well, that is a different way of addressing life.
Mm.
Uh, you don't have to take on that lifestyle, but the willingness to look at it and say, well, okay, so these people are living like this. I wouldn't live like that. I would live like this, but it's different, and therefore I'm going to accept the fact that there is difference out there. So it's about that. It's connected to that capacity to navigate change, but I think it's got an effect of personality that looks for difference and accepts difference. So I think one of the fears that people have is when they're going cross-culturally is that they're going to somehow be subsumed by the new culture they go to.
Mm.
That somehow they will lose the values and the beliefs and the behaviors that they had in their own culture, home culture, and that this new culture is somehow going to be a threat to that. And it's not, because the only thing that's going to change are the things that you're going to let it change. And so have faith in your own capacity to identify differences and have faith in your capacity to incorporate differences that make you more resilient and more the person that you're planning on being, and the capacity to say no to a whole lot of things that are available. I mean, that's what we want from children, the capacity to look at something and say, oh, no to that. And so we develop that capacity of saying yes and no. So it's about change and it's about difference, I think, Brandy, is the kind of if there's a personality style to it, I haven't quite seen it. I think all of the personality styles that we come across have the capacity to change and grow. So it's I think it's more about an intentional way of changing, intentional way of growing.
Dwayne Elmer in Cross-Cultural Servanthood talks about thinking gray and tolerating ambiguity. And they kind of, to me, that sums up what you're talking about, this ability to
Yeah.
just accept those differences and
Yeah.
not perhaps get stuck in a right way and a wrong way.
So I think James, what we this comes back to then is the kind of the community that you come out of,
Mm.
or the social network that you come out of. I think, and that's so what I've experienced in my life, and you've probably seen the same thing in context, cross-cultural context, is that those who have grown up in a community that is very clear about its identity and with very clear boundaries around that identity and a tendency to be a little bit threat focused rather than opportunity focused, those folk have a harder time in a cross-cultural context than those that have grown up with communities or social networks that have quite strong beliefs, quite strong understandings of what is right and what is wrong, but also accepting of the ambiguity and the differences that are in other parts of the community. Those folk tend to do better. It's not to say there's no challenges, but I think that there is that. I think that being surprised by the extent of difference can sometimes shock people, really
Mm.
shock them, because they had no understanding really that the world was such a different place.
Yeah, I'm hearing in my mind as you're talking about this, curiosity and flexibility are
Absolutely. Yeah.
a couple of things that could really help you as you're
Yes.
building resilience. Mm.
Yeah. So I mean, I look for when I was actually recruited. I had a role for an international recruiter for a while in a couple of agencies, and so what we decided that is that there was any number of people who had the skill sets in their resume. If you're looking for technical skill sets, hundreds of them.
Right.
So the difficulty was how do you choose which person is going to be the right one? And I think curiosity was one of the things that we were looking at in the end, was how curious are you about the things you're going to experience, but also how curious are you about how you are going to engage with that world that you experience. So it's not like watching a documentary on TV about elephants. It's about actually walking with the elephants, and how you relate to a herd of elephants on a dusty road in Africa is completely different than how you do when you're sitting in your living room watching a big screen with elephants going past. It's a totally different experience. If you want to go and walk with the elephants, then you're going to have to take some advice and guidance. But if you're the kind of person that gets there and I look at you as a recruiter and say, you're thoroughly enjoying this, you're getting into this in a big way, and you're being respectful at the same time, then you're the kind of person that I might be interested in recruiting for this position.
I'm thinking about an example from our experience when we moved to Central Asia. One of the things that I think still goes on there quite a bit are arranged marriages, and
Yes.
families will arrange it. And, a first impression is like, oh, that's so archaic and let people choose, who they love and everything. But it's really a way of, protecting your child.
Yeah.
When you feel like you're marrying your child into a family that you respect, then
Yes.
that's more important than whatever idea that love is. And that was like one of the things of growing and like going from arranged marriages to like, okay, I can see the value of this,
Yeah.
instead of thinking, that's all wrong.
Yeah. No, and that's right. And you don't have to do it for yourself,
Right.
but you can understand why it makes sense in a different context to do it
Right.
like that. And then you look at, well, one of the things we talked about a lot in resilience is what supports you when you go into a cross-cultural society environment. And a lot of the things we found from the Western cultures is that a lot of that social support is kind of it's not as obvious as it would be like the arranged marriage thing. So we've taken a lot of things for granted. We take for granted the convenience of driving on a road and not getting run into by someone driving on the wrong side of the road most of the time. We take comfort from the fact that we go to the supermarket and the things that we want are largely going to be there. We take comfort from the fact that we can walk down a street, largely we can walk down a street without being robbed. And so there's a lot of things that support us in that Western context of a democratic, well managed, what we would call democratic, well managed society. If you're in a place where the only people that you can really trust are your family, because you can't trust anyone else, and you've got a large extended family, then it makes sense for that large extended family to look at how you're going to form a relationship and marriage outside of that family. And you have to trust the other family. So you're going to have a whole lot of negotiations about that because it is, as you said, it's about the safety of the individual and the safety of the family. I We largely choose where our kids go to school. Well, it's pretty much an arranged relationship, really. If we're saying that social network at that school is going to be better for my child than that one over there. So we're essentially doing a similar thing, but we're doing it a little more discreetly. But
Yeah.
the kids know. That's the thing about the kids know. The kids know exactly, you know. That's why they say, Mom, 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 why am I having to do this? You know, because I said so. Essentially, it's because I said so for your own welfare.
That's right.
So we do that. We arrange relationships, but we do it in a different way. And that part of the difference is that if you can accept that without having to say, well, that's how we're going to run our lives, then I think you have that flexibility, you've got that curiosity, you've got that ability to bounce forward and continue going.
What does that resilience muscle look like over time? Like I can see it going either way, where the more challenges you experience, the more resilient you become, the more skills that you develop. But I could also see there being a fatigue as you keep challenging. So, what does
Yeah.
growing in resilience look like over time?
James, that's such a fantastic question, really. One of the issues that we identified, I guess, midway through my career was that skills become so refined that there's a possibility that they could separate you from everybody else that you're with. You know, whatever you are, when you're the top of the game, whatever the game is that you're involved in, whatever career you're involved in, the better you get at it, the fewer people there are who are as good as you at doing what you're doing. And so there's that tendency towards reduced social interaction. Now, a true resilience model is one where you are within a social network that is very supportive. So social support, social networks are the most external supportive thing that you can have in terms of resilience. So as you say, James, the point is that if you become so skilled in your own individual resilience that you are moving away from a social network, then the danger is that you become isolated. You become like an incredibly fit athlete, but no one to play with.
Hmm.
And social isolation is actually the biggest thing that compromises resilience. So I think you've got to balance it. You've got to balance those skills out. And our suggestion with that is, look, if you're really skilled, say you're really skilled with the guitar or the ukulele, you could get so skilled that you could play by yourself. But at times, what I'd suggest you do is put down the guitar and the ukulele and go over and play the piano, which you don't play very well, but play with the group.
Hmm.
You know, because it's playing with the group that is going to give you the resilience. So do something or other that maybe you're not quite so skilled with, and do that with other people, because that will help build your social network. You can still be extremely good at that individual skill you've got, but don't forget to play around, literally play around with
Hmm.
other things that are interesting with other people, because that will give you that broad network of what you need to do. Just don't become isolated. Becoming isolated is the worst thing that can ever happen to you.
I was just reading Why Zebras Don't Get Ulcers by Sapolsky.
Yes,
And
that's a good one.
he boils it down to two things. He goes, there are two main things that will almost guarantee significant lifelong issues with your health, physical, mental health, and that's poverty and isolation.
Mm.
Yeah,
All of the research just is so connected to the
Yeah.
how damaging that is to our health in all of the ways it can be.
yeah.
Mm.
And I think that's the key thing, because if you're isolated, it doesn't matter how good you are at an individual task. If you're isolated, it's not the thing for us human beings to be isolated. We need to be in some kind of community. And so what I did when I was working with as a coach with experienced humanitarians or missionaries would be to say, look, write down the list of people, have a list of names, the ones that are your core social network, the ones that if you picked up the phone or you sent a request for a call, that they would answer, you know, that they would put down what they were doing and they would answer to talk with you. Okay, those are your core networks, and then write down the names of those, and then and sounds a little bit analytical, but say how many times in the last 6 months have you talked with them? And if you've got a whole bunch of zeros against them, then you've got a notional social network, but actually you haven't engaged with it.
Yeah, it's not
So
a
I'd say, look,
functional.
yeah. So I'd say, look, be active. Put it down in your diary. Say, I'm going to call Joe, or I'm going to call Bill, or I'm going to call on this date or this week, and make it happen, because that's how you keep building your resilience in your network. And that network will be the thing that will carry you all the way through your career and into, whatever retirement is. But you've got to work at it. It's not going to happen by happenstance.
Do you think there is a tendency for cross-cultural workers to become more isolated, like as you become more, like as you said, John, more specialized in your
Yeah.
field and such? Do you think there's tendency for that and maybe less flexibility too?
Yeah, and I think that the danger with that is that if you've got, it starts at the very beginning when you leave, when you go from your culture to another culture. The moment you've spent 3 months in this other culture, you're already beginning to see differences and experience differences from the culture you came from. And it's very hard to actually think about how do you continue that, bridging that gap. And so my advice is, look, what was what was unconscious or subconscious in the way in which you related to your culture before you left, you now have to be intentional about it. So when you're in this new culture, then look at what are the things that kept you connected to this other culture and be intentional about it. I mean, here's an example. It's a simple one, but I worked with a guy in Cambodia who was feeling quite isolated from his culture. That he moved from Washington, D.C. to Cambodia, and the culture that he was experiencing in Cambodia was not primarily what he was used to. And so I asked him what he missed most of all. And he said he missed two things. He missed going to a cafe for coffee and listening to NPR. So I thought, well, that's interesting. But I said, look, can you get NPR? And he said, I can get NPR through the internet. That's no problem. I said, well, why not just run NPR in the background in your house? Just let it run there. And he said, well, that's an idea. I've never thought about doing that. And I said, there's a couple of coffee houses in such and such a street that are serve quite good coffee. Why don't you just go down there in the morning, have a coffee, go back home, and do what you have to do in the home, because he worked remotely, and have NPR on the background. And he said it was just such a great relief to be able to do that. And they're simple things, I think, Brandy, but they're things that you intentionally do that keep you connected. So that's part of what you can do for yourself when you go over there, is what is it that keeps you connected to that community? Remembering people's birthdays, remembering their anniversaries, wishing them, happiness on significant holidays. Because you often find when you go to another culture that they don't celebrate the same holidays that we celebrated at home. And no one closes the shops for those things. And you have to go to work. And what? You're not supposed to do this. You're supposed to be, but they don't. And so somehow you've got to factor that in and say, well, we're going to do this, whatever this vacation holiday is, we're going to do this here, and we're going to recreate it just for ourselves. And we're going to acknowledge that, and we're going to connect with our community back home and say, we are doing whatever this holiday thing is, but we're doing it with you in spirit. It's hard, but it's actually work. It needs to be done.
Yeah, I remember having American Thanksgiving with a literal wild turkey that we I don't know, someone caught for us. We had to get the pin feathers out of. We're doing it. We're doing American
But
Thanksgiving.
but doesn't that add so much to it?
Yeah.
There's I think you get a renewed depth of whatever these traditions are when you have to go and struggle to get the trappings together to make it feel like it.
Yeah.
That becomes then some kind of centralized ritual. I mean, I use ritual in the sense of just being a regular thing for your family and for your unit that really demonstrates to your children just how valuable this is.
Yeah.
Because you've made the effort, you've gone and pulled all this stuff together, and it's not quite like we would have had back home, but it is still, this is the reason. We are giving thanks because this is the reason that we're doing it. We're giving thanks. And it's not so much about the turkey or the rest of it, although it is, but it's about the giving thanks. And so we're demonstrating to our family and to our friends, this is critical to us. This is important. We
Yeah.
do this because of this reason. So yeah, do it. It's hard work, but now it can be fun.
Yeah, I still have very vivid memories of my husband wrestling the turkey, like trying to get it into the oven because it was so stiff. But Anyhow.
It's not. Yeah. So there you are. So you've retained that memory now, and that is a resilience memory. That's what that is. It's a resilience memory because it tells you we did this once. Now, if something else comes, we'll figure out a way of doing it. But we'll do this together, not just our own. We'll do this together.
I wonder if you could talk a little bit about the difference. I mean, you're kind of talking about like some resilience, some managing stress. What does it look like to be resilient in more of a post-crisis situation versus more of a chronic long-term situation? Because
Yeah.
somebody goes overseas, let's say they do 3 years at a time. There's this kind of resilience needed for 3 years, and then there's
Yeah.
also this, I just had a car wreck and I need to respond to that. There's these kind of two different components. Could you just talk about those a little bit and what's
Yeah.
needed differently for those two different things?
I think the thing about it is trying to prepare yourself for the fact that there will be a car wreck. I mean, I use that in term as
Yeah.
it's not necessarily a physical car wreck, but
Crisis.
something will happen. There'll be a crisis. We're always going to have, and the thing about a crisis is it's unexpected. So we think we're planning for this crisis, and lo and behold, we actually have this one. And that came out of left field. I was prepared to do this, but now I'm at loss to do this. So I think, James, it goes back to that original thing as what gives you resilience as an individual. It's the building the strength of your social network. Who are your friends? Who can you really trust? Who in a crisis could you call upon to assist you? So that's one thing. And the other thing is that one of the biggest kind of things that happens to people who go cross-culturally is that they know that they can handle it.
Mm,
I know I can handle this. I can deal with anything they throw at me because I'm strong, and the proof is that I'm here.
right.
Right? So if something happens, you'll try even harder to actually overcome whatever this challenge is. There's a point at which, just as a side, my father was a doctor and my brother is a doctor, and they say one of the things about survival of a major incident, major physical incident, is the acceptance by the patient that they need assistance,
Mm,
that they can't do this by themselves. So there's a point in the middle of a crisis or at a crisis where you let go. You don't give up. You let go and let others support you. And the difference between letting go and giving up is significant. Giving up is like the stone sinking when it's skipping across the ocean. Letting go is letting someone else hold you while you gather the strength you need to move forward. And so I think that in a crisis, what we need to have had is we've had to have built our kind of network of support and then call on that and let those guys support us as we go through it. That the hardest thing that vets face when they go back is how do you manage this experience that I had when I was in the field? And the whole point of the VA in the States is to try and provide that kind of support for returning vets. But it's on the vet to
mm,
say, I'm going to let go and let other people support me. And that's a really hard thing to do because vets are just the same as the rest of us cross-cultural workers. They've been trained to go somewhere and to do something different and to be strong and not to give up.
mm.
So letting go and letting someone else help you is really, really hard. But if you're going to survive a crisis, if you're going to survive one of those critical events like a car wreck or a coup or an earthquake or whatever, at some point you need to let something go and let other people support you. So I think that's my critical thing for that one, Jim.
Love
Letting
that.
go.
What would you want maybe sending churches, sending organizations to understand about resilience, as
Yeah.
they're sending people overseas?
Goes back to, I think for me, it goes back to that whole working definition of change. The moment you send someone overseas, in whatever context, you need to accept that they will be different. That the moment they interact with a different culture, they begin to change. So that when they come back in 6 months or 3 years or 6 years or whatever it is, they will be different people because they've grown new skills, they've had new experiences. They will have a new depth of wisdom that they wouldn't have developed in this context. And that's why we sent them. We sent them because we saw that they had this capacity for wisdom, this capacity for experience, this capacity for bringing people in. They go, that gets refined in the experiences they have over there. They come back we expect them to have changed. We welcome that change because that change is going to be the wisdom that we can use as sending organizations to grow and develop in our own communities. You know, I think that one of the worst things that a family or a sending organization can do is to expect the person to come back exactly as they were. It never happens. I mean, you can send your kids to college, to university, and they're going to come back different. And in just in one semester, they'll be different. You know? And we expect that. It surprises us how they're different, but it's part of why we sent them. So I think the sending organizations that deny the change can be the most hurtful. And I think that, those of us who've worked overseas, if we've come back and find that the culture or the organization that sent us cannot accept the way in which we've changed or the fact that we've changed, that can be more harmful, I think, than some of the things that happened to us when we were overseas. Because it feels like that the family that sent us is no longer wants us.
Mm.
And we know we can't go back. We have to go forward. We have to go forward somewhere. Where are we going to go? So somehow having the courage as a community of sending, the courage to say, we're going to send you with our blessing. We're going to support you with our blessing. We expect you to change and be different when you come back again. And we don't know what that change is going to be, and neither do you. But when you come back, we're going to want to explore what those changes mean for us as a community, as what it's meant for you as an individual or as a family. And together we will look at those changes and we will incorporate those changes where they are needed in our own community with wisdom, with love, and with caring and acceptance. It's a very hard thing to do.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's fantastic.
But it's tough. I mean, I acknowledge that it's really tough because what we would like to have when people have gone overseas or gone to college is we'd like to have that experience again. One of the things I appreciate about having grandchildren is that we get to do with our grandkids the things that we did with our kids a generation earlier. And so in a sense, we're reprising the experiences we had, but with the knowledge that our grandkids are going to grow so fast that the things that they were doing, that we were doing with our own kids, that's going to change as well. So it's kind of like you can't go back, but you can experience some things, similar things in a different way. I mean, like your experience of Thanksgiving, Brandi, no matter how you experience Thanksgiving in the future, there's going to be that memory of that time when you had to do Thanksgiving yourself. And that shows something or other about how you changed, how you grew, how you moved through this. Most of the people in the room you have Thanksgiving with aren't going to experience doing that yourself, but you know it. And they know you had some experiences, but they welcome you back into that with thanks that you've changed. And that gives value to their community as well as it does to you.
I really like that, John. I hope people hearing this really take that to heart, that it really is a beautiful thing to welcome the person back, however they've changed and grown, to welcome them back and to be curious
Yeah.
about
Be
how the
curious.
work has changed them.
Yeah. And I think being curious is the thing. The other thing too is that there needs to be a realization, acceptance on the part of sending organizations and of the people who they've sent that our sending organization has a culture and a structure. And that culture and structure has grown and maybe changed while we've been away. But we can't expect to come back into the same role that we had in ministry or leadership that we had when we left. Because in a sense, we're being auditioned or interviewed for a new role. I may have come back from my 5 years in Asia or Africa, but I may not be the appropriate person now to lead ministry in this organization in this way, because my skill set is different. My skill set is not the same as it was when I left, but it's a skill set nonetheless. So there's a challenge there. So my expectations in coming back are I'm not going to come back in as the senior pastor or as the CEO or anything like that, because I don't have that skill set any longer. I had it 5 years ago, but it's a different skill set now. But I do have a skill set. So what I would like us to think about doing is how do we, as those that have sent and those that are coming back, how do we sit down and look at what are the skill sets you now have? What is the wisdom you've got? What are the learnings that you've gathered? Where can that be applied for the greater good of this community or the wider community? And we will help you as a sending community. We will take it our responsibility to help you discern what is the place in the role that you play within this community and outside it. So make it an active type of process. Think of it as a new person coming into the community rather than this person coming back. We've got a new person coming in with a lot of skills, a lot of experience that we haven't seen ourselves. What can this person add to our ministry, to our mission? And how can we utilize that together? How can we discern that? And how can we move together so that we remain as a community of growth?
Gosh, it's been, great to have you on. I'm wondering if you have any resources that you could point people to as they're wanting to grow in resilience or in understanding stress, particularly for cross.
The active dynamic resource that I go back to often is the member care organizations. And there are a number of member care organizations around the world of which you'll know as well. But so I would suggest that people do a Google search for member care, and they'll come up with a whole series of, I don't want to promote any one particular one because they're slightly different in the way in which they approach. But you'll know from your own experiences, James, that there's quite a wealth of experience in the member care community. And the resources that are available in those member care communities are significant. And I think that as people explore that, they will find that there's options for both the sending organizations and for those that are being sent. And they can utilize those resources there. I think they are the ones that appeal to me most because they're dynamic, they're changing. And as our world seems to be in a process at the moment of rapid change at many levels, I think we need that dynamic rather than, say, going back. I mean, as much as I'd like to promote my own book, I don't think that is actually the resource we need for today. I think we need a resource that's grown and developed since that was written. And I think the member care communities are the places to look for that. But my advice to everybody is talk to someone. Reach out and talk to someone. That's the way you will build your own understanding.
It's been really great talking with you, John.
Yeah, I love it.
My pleasure. Thank you for inviting me along.
We will release you to your wetland experience.
Thank you very much. Yes, it's a beautiful day here. It's just dawned, clear blue sky, and I will go out there and enjoy working with plants and people.
Perfect.
Right. I have to say this, tell Frodo hi.
Well, he's out there still. He's out there. Just got to get past the Balrog.
I know. He's passed.
All right, John. Thanks so much for being here. Have a great
Thanks,
day.
James. Thanks, Brandi.
Thanks,
Bye.
John.
Bye.
Bye. He's worked for over 25 years in international humanitarian aid, focusing on the development and implementation. Whoa, I'm going to start over. Computer's like, you got something important going on. How about we even back up?
Yeah, because who cares?
Right.